My name is Jesper. I represent a company called Warm. We monitor radio stations globally by using music DNA, audio fingerprinting technology. So we cover 27,000 radio stations globally. With the artist in mind, we want to make radio airplay data accessible for the whole vertical of the music industry. So today I have invited a few guests. Rachel from Straaberger Communication. I think you guys can present yourself. We have a substitution, Erik instead of Alexandra, and also Bernard substituting for...
Didn't know about that.
Okay, Freckles. Another radio station. So, yeah, please, could you tell me a little about the radio station that you work with?
Yeah, I'm working for RTBF, which is a French-speaking Belgian national radio and TV. And I'm working for radio mainly, so I'm a music coordinator for all the radios.
Okay. Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel Straaberger. I run a data-driven marketing and promotion company. Our clients are labels, publishers, managers, and artists. We are based in Switzerland, but our offices are in Barcelona.
Hi everybody, I'm Erik. I'm from Targetspot, but we have a larger company called Audio Valley, so which maybe a brand that knows better is Radionomy, which is a platform to create web radio stations. We started in Belgium, and now we have offices in North America and Europe.
Awesome. So, Bernard, how do you select music on your radio station? As I understand it, you have 5 different channels ranging from classical music.
We have 6 radios. Actually, 4 of them are musical radios.
Okay.
Like every national public radio in Europe, we have a classical music station called MusicTech. We have a very huge success with a radio named Classic 21, Classic 21, which is a rock, classic pop, and today's rock music. But the average age of the listener is 47. It's a huge success in Belgium, not only in the French part of the country, even in Flanders, even in France. We also have a radio named Pure FM, formerly known as Pure FM. We dropped the FM for obvious reasons, because the FM will die probably in something like 10 years from now, which is a radio, pop, electro, a little bit of urban music. The target is the millennials, so people from 25 to 39. We also have a new radio, which is an hybrid. It's a DAB plus a radio and a web radio, but also it's an app and a YouTube channel called, the name of that radio is Tarmac. And the target is people from 15 to 25, and it's mainly urban and hip-hop music.
Okay, so is it difficult as, let's say, an indie artist or label to get music played on your stations? Or let's say, is it easier for major labels, for example? Do they have an advantage to get music on your radio station? Or how do you see that? How is the selection process of music?
Obviously, it's different from one radio to another. For Classic 21, which is a classic rock station, of course, it's a back catalog, it's music, but we also focus on local new bands in that field, the rock music, of course. On Pure FM, sorry about that. I even forgot that they changed the name 2 years ago. On Pure, it's different, of course, but we play mainly artists from all over the world, but we focus as well on Belgian bands, even DIY bands. You can have sometimes, I'll give you an example maybe later, but we have many artists who send just their production, and we play them without a record company. Not demos, but People who don't have a record company or a plugger like you. Maybe you will explain that later. But so no, it's not. We don't make any difference.
Okay, that's good because I have the feeling that, and maybe you can tell more about that, Rachel. But it seems like in some countries, especially on the large, FM and national radios, that it is much easier for the local major label, for example, to get music playlisted. Is that fair to say, or?
I mean, I think it's always the same story. If it's radio or if it's streaming, there's a priority list, and labels will be pitching the priority list. So if you're not in that priority list, you probably won't be pitched. So we count on luck. There's a lot of things happening organically, or let's say really good people within the radios that take the time to go and do these discoveries and find out really great artists. Then we generally jump in and are grateful and thank the radios for that chance and possibility. Or, of course, pitching. So labels do pitching, publishers, in theory, should be doing some pitching, and radio pluggers pitch to radios,
Is it fair to say that you focus more on specialist radios than let's say, the obvious large commercial radios in general?
The thing is that our business model is really a 360 business model. So we will be pitching to radio, but we will be pitching to blogs, and we will be working very intensively with the labels in each and every country. So we're not specifically a radio plugger. So a radio plugger will probably have better relationships in specific countries than we would. We build relationships by saying thank you when a radio plays one of our artists, for example. And then we start building that relationship with that radio.
Okay. While we're at it, do you think that that you have to break an artist locally, or doesn't it matter anymore? Because you're talking about Belgian local artists, and I know that you work pretty much international. Does it matter that you have to do something in your local country first, or?
I mean, I don't think there's a good answer here. And there's also this French saying, nul n'est prophète dans son propre pays, c'est ça? So sometimes there are artists that are really, really popular in their own countries and do not cross over, and some artists will be working much better outside than in their own country. So I think you're always very happy of whatever success you can get, and wherever the success comes from, well, Okay.
Could you tell us a little bit about radionomy? Because for me, I'm calling it like a personal radio, because you're basically allowing everyone to create a radio or web radio, right? So can you tell us about why did you do that, and when did you launch, and what was the point with this in a streaming world where radio apparently is dying?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Radionomy was created in 2008, and actually really as a startup in Belgium, 3 people sitting together and thinking about, okay, what will be the future of radio when FM is going away or more digitalized. And we created actually a platform where radio stations could really focus on creativity and don't need to bother about bandwidth, music rights. We cover actually the whole scope of planner and how to create your radio station. So since 2008, approximately 600,000 radio stations were created. The business model was really like, create a radio station, everything is for free, and we will take care that ads will be served in those radio stations, because ads is not bad for a radio station. It just elevates more to a serial radio station sometimes, certainly for the listeners. So it went really crazy, 600,000 radio stations, but 90% disappeared. And that's because radio is still a radio business. So it's not because I create a radio station, a web radio, upload my music. And if you don't have really your fans, and that's what we see on a radio station, it is hard work. So it's not going easily like that. So today there's approximately 20,000 radio stations active on Radionomy on a global scale. So we have radio stations. Japan, for example, was one of our top 5 countries. And now we are, of course, it's like 10 years ago. So now we have that model under pressure because we try to really the small broadcasters to help them to make sure that they can have and create a web radio. But yeah, you need now to discuss your music rights country by country, where in the past we had like a global agreement across more than 150 countries. So it's certainly challenging times, but we see that every day 150 radio stations are created. And could be a fisherman's club here nearby, having 600 listeners a day, but those are really the fans. You know, those are really niche radios that you can't find more in the generalistic or the general radio stations. You know, if you want jazz from 35 to 55, for example, you will not get that in the big radio stations, but you will find that just in those particular stations.
Yes, so I mean, this supports at least my idea that you know, niche radios and in general niche and taste makers, etc., is like growing because of, you know, there is like what is like 40,000 new songs released on streaming services. So people need some kind of curation to find music, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's still, you know, you have machine learning and you have the streamers that are more using like a mix between curation and machines and trying to predict what actually a listener wants to hear. But you know, numbers out of the US says that 60% of the Spotify listeners are discovering music through radio stations. So it's still an important base and source to understand. But I think also we go a little bit away about radio, and we would like to call it more like audio. The rise of the podcasts are coming in, personalization. It's a web radio gives you more information about your audience, who you are. You can target better. But also we do ad insertions, you know, based on your usage. And of course, you have the global privacy directive in Europe, so we need to apply to that. But I think the next step, and that's to your question, is personalization of content. And not only we do already personalization of ads, but where a content will change according what you want to hear. You will maybe have the same music but different content, or different music and the same content. I know here in Belgium, Joe FM is trying that, is having the same content on all their radio stations, but you can really swap from 80s music to hit music or to whatever style of music. So that personalization is only possible in a digital world.
Cool. And with services like Radionomy, do you then think that eventually we will see more radio stations or less?
More. I think differently. Differently, you know, the stations that are created on Radionomy or another platform that we own is Shotcast, which is like 70,000 radio stations. If you go to mainstream, you will not, you know, you will not get through that clutter. And there will be different radio stations with different content. And also, you know, I think also radio stations need to think how they can innovate. People want to listen to your content wherever they are, whatever device, and when they want to listen. So radio on demand or content on demand, and that's what podcast is doing right now. So you can easily record a show, having as a download. So you can extend your audience to a larger base of people.
And you can identify them easier, I guess, because it's...
Yeah, I think the radio works already for 50 years the same way. It's declarative, you know, what's my audience, 1834 and graduation type and whatever. Now to applying data onto it, you can really better understand who is your audience. And maybe you think that your radio station is skewing to female, and you realize that that is not true. So it is opening, I think, also for programming. You know, I think declarative in Belgium is like every 3 months, you know, if your show is working well, and then they give you the rating points, and if everything is good. in digital, you can nearly track day by day or week by week. You're changing a host from 8 a.m. and you're moving him to the 11 a.m. This can drastically change your listener base. So I think it's insights for the radio, the broadcasters, and certainly we are here in a commercial model. So it's also insights for advertisers that will spend money on the radio stations and so that they can at least. Maybe starting from a hobby, maybe starting from a cellar, a little room in their house, but at least earning some money as well with the radio station.
Yeah, and I guess we will be able to see, maybe we're already seeing that, but companies as well as could be influencers. It could be a fisherman, as you said, but basically anyone can now create their own audio feed, which is maybe more. Future than radio?
Well, it is the next evolution, I would say, for radio stations. Like Bernard was telling us, is the FM will, it will disappear somehow, somewhere in the future, and it will go through other distribution channels, which is IP, internet, and DAB+. So yeah, I think that there is an evolution to it, and we see now an innovation in radio. What we haven't seen for the last 40 years. I would say in marketing, yes, radio station did great marketing, we're building up the brands, but now it's difficult to build up a brand in a radio station. You're building up an audience, and the audience is what you are.
Yeah. So if you do good curation and great music and you can market your channel, the sky is the limit, basically.
Exactly. We have radio stations on Radionomy that have a bigger audience than some bigger radio stations that put their streams online. So and did their promotion by themselves. Radio Mozart is one of them. He really has an audience globally. Like you can detect from the name, it's quite classical music. And that is, I think, changing how radio builders and radio makers are looking to their audience.
Cool. Rachel, when you work as a consultant in this area, how do you identify the radios, or how do you value them in terms of whether or not it's worth focusing on these different stations?
Well, I think everything is worth focusing on, and especially in today's music market, there is no under something. Everything is important. So we track radio, we have lots of, thanks to technology, we track playlisting, we track a lot of things. But for radio, we work with one and only program, which we think is really, really good, and it's written on his T-shirt. It's Warm Music, and we track literally, I don't know how many now. Now I'm a bad salesperson.
27,000.
27,000 radios that are tracked. So it's really, really interesting because with the tool we see which country, which radio, and at what time the track has been broadcasted. So we can also understand if the track, let's say in electronic music, was part of a mix, or if the radio actually put it in as a track, like on radio. And then we generally cross-promote, like, for example, if suddenly there's like some Shazams in a specific area, we'll be like, whoa, why are there Shazams here? Let's check it out. And then we'll go really in depth and understand why there's Shazams, and maybe there's Shazams because local radio is actually supporting the track. And then we'll approach the radio and say, thank you. And yeah, that's generally what we do.
Yeah, so because I guess, when you spot like some random radio station in Mongolia plays a certain song that you're working on, you don't know the amount of listeners.
Oh, never mind. We will anyway say thank you.
But there's probably more than one.
Yes. Absolutely, and if it's on Warm, it's a radio, right? So, we will go and reach out to absolutely everyone. Of course, if there's a one random spin, maybe not. But as soon as we see that the radio is supporting, we will go and reach out and say thank you.
which I guess makes it much easier for new releases.
Oh, 100%, yes. And then generally we'll ask our client or the artist to even do like a personalized ID, as in, hi, this is Rachel, and you're listening to Warm Radio. And then the radio that played it by chance or by chance will probably be supporting that track more, and hopefully we'll build a relationship so that they will then support the next single of the specific artist.
I want to jump back to you a little bit, just quickly touching base on the rights stuff around your product. So, how does it work when people create a radio station on Radio Anonymous, for example? Do they have to do like a local agreement with their societies, or have you already handled that? Or
yeah, we handle that now country by country, but we come from by far streaming audio and web radio. If you see the tariffs, how they are going up in the US, for example, you know, they're mixing up sometimes a little bit streaming on demand, like Spotify, SoundCloud, and Deezer, and all the rest, with the radio stations, which is still there for promotion of artists. And I remember when we closed the first contracts, and we asked, can we have a contract, you know, to Sound Exchange or SACEM or Sabam, Burma. They said, we don't have really a contract for you guys, so we don't know where you fit right in. You know, are you radio? But you're streaming. So that's getting better, but not the tariffs. I think it's as a web radio, you're absolutely not in the same as a classical radio, and that is making under pressure the business model, because it's still promoting artists. You know, in the past, here in Belgium, they subsidized the press. So I think that the industry should really see to help those smaller broadcasters grow and make sure that artist is remunerated for his music and his creation.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Does a web radio pay neighboring rights?
It depends country by country. If your audience, you know, is only 2% in Germany and 98% in France, you will settle that in France.
It seems to me, speaking of rights, it seems to me that both in terms of the rights side and, you know, blanket license fees and minute rates, tariffs, and all that it's super complicated, obviously, because all countries have their own you know, systems, or some stations or some countries, they change their rates on a monthly basis. Some do it on a biannually. Some, like Buma Stema in Holland, they have a second rate, and others have minute rates and per play rates. So I think this in itself is a huge problem, right? I mean,
it is. So for Radionomy, we cover that. So it's quite a lot of work to give dedicated list country by country what they want to know and what we need to pay to them. So we cover the full rights for all those radio stations. On the shortcast with 70,000 radio stations, they are paying their own rights. So they're using technology and ad injection and whatever they need, planners and to bandwidth servers. But they need to settle their own rights. And yeah, they struggle with that. So a smaller radio station that needs to hand over the paperwork, and it's very confusing, but I think the industry can certainly help on that and make sure that not everything will be concentrated to those big players. And maybe we'll end up with just 3 players in the world and no radio business anymore. So we really need to take care of that and make sure that there's still place for creativity, there's still place for a healthy economic model. I don't know that much radio broadcasters that really get really rich or doing $3 billion of revenue like some streamers, or 5 billion now. So yeah, it is certainly something that the industry should look at. But we don't really have that power. It's very national, and we would love to go even to Europe and address that on a European level.
And is that something that you see, like this pressure from streaming services in terms of running your radio? Do you feel like you're losing audience, maybe particularly the millennials and stuff, or do you feel pretty secure dividing it up?
Secure is not the right word, but yeah, of course, we see that, but you have to know that music. First of all, you have to know that music is still the main reason for people to listen to radio, and for the people from maybe I think it's from 17 to 34, the main platform for them to discover new music is radio. Broadcasted radio. But just to go back to the previous question, there is a survey a bit controversial, but I think it's important to say that for an artist to earn 100 euros, you have to be played 14 times on a broadcasted radio, 14 times. To earn 100 euros, the same artist has to sell, I think it's 100 albums. But he has to have, I think it's maybe under your.
No, I think there will be
1 million streams on a free platform.
No.
So it's different. Of course, they will have data. They can argue with I don't know, a promoter that they have 3 million streams or something like that, which is important as well. But they don't earn money from that. No, so it's important for us to know that, but radio is still very important here.
So I want to touch base on another thing, because how I see it a little bit, I'm obviously a little biased towards radio, but it seems like that, you know, IFPI together with the rights organizations, they kind of like neglect a majority of stations. I mean, it looks like that, let's say, only maybe 10, 15, 20% of the radio stations in the world actually have some kind of measurable tariff or minute rate or second rate attached, whereas the remaining is basically paying a license or blanket license fee. It seems like there's a lot of misconception in the world of radio, where people say, well, radio doesn't pay. But in fact, the radios usually pay, at least in Europe, and then it's about how the society is actually distributed. But it seems like this, together with the IFPI, making sure that only large stations counts on the official charts and so on, it's kind of like devaluating or neglecting the majority of stations. Is that fair to say? Or it's like an open question.
Like I said before, they were not ready to address that type of radio stations. You know, web radio, playing music. You know, podcast. You use a little bit of music in your podcast. You need to pay your right on that. So I think that it's going to the positive way, but the industry is growing quicker than legislation, and sometimes in some countries, and others they don't want to hear, and others they don't care. If you look really in Europe, and I think there is a way like they did it in the US with Sound Exchange, which is something that the Senate created. You could do that on a European level, where you really separate the on-demand music with radio stations, and because you're right, everybody who is broadcasting, they do pay.
It's kind of hard in most countries to run a radio station and not paying the society, because the society will know instantly. It's like you cannot open a restaurant and then not pay for the music. But
exactly.
That's like exactly the same problem. They cash in and then they distribute it based on market share or sample tests or something like that from other formats.
So there's certainly innovation there, but I think the rights will be, and you see the law cases falling down. Spotify is also in different discussions and law cases. We had our fair share of law cases as well. So it's finding the middle ground and make sure that every artist, the creativity is remunerated, but also that radio in existence can stay alive and continue to promote those artists, because the discovery happens there. Mentioned here a couple of times, and you will probably have it then later in your playlist. That's what I do. I have still my favorite radio station, Studio Brussels. I'm quite older, so the Flemish side here in Belgium, and I listen to it digitally or the rest, so I'm still listening to my radio station, but the millennials or today, they are less linked to a brand. They're more like, where can I find the content that I like? And I think streamers have their place, and we saw the audience going down. No, audio is in very good shape. but I call it audio.
Instead of radio.
Yeah, it's radio, it's podcast, it's audio in the sense of, and the consumption is rising. Even with the streamers on top of that. So your share of ear, of course, you cannot listen to Spotify and to a radio station, but you will listen to your radio station in a different moment. Spotify maybe for your running, radio station while your podcast while you commute. At work, you will maybe again put a playlist or have a normal whatever program station. So it is certainly an evolution that that the industry or the legislation should follow.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to, if I may, to a previous question about the local artists. I think that nobody wants to be a local artist, no. Of course.
Other than if you're in the US.
I don't know if, Rachel, do you sometimes work on French-speaking artists? Or is it mainly English-speaking artists?
Yeah, it depends. It depends. Our business model is very, very international, so... no, we would tend to really work on international artists.
I ask you that because three recent examples, huge artists are from this part of the country, Wallifornia or Brussels. You have Stromae, Angèle, and Damso. They are people who were maybe first broadcasted in Belgium, but at the same time it was in France. So France and the French part of Belgium, they are working together. So without France, probably Damso will not be so huge. But it's important to start here, of course, but the main goal for those artists is to be global. And Angèle, for instance, who sings in French, will perform in New York. Stromae, I saw him a few years ago in New York as well. So they became global artists. That's the goal. Same for an artist called Lost Frequencies. Just to tell you a story about him, he used to be a local artist. Now he's a global DJ superstar, but he just sent an email to the head of music of one of our radio, Pure FM at that time, and with this track attached. And the guy listened to it, loved it, played it, and it started like that, really. It would have been a huge star anyway, but he started like that.
But that brings me kind of to a little bit in the world that I'm from, that it is super important for the artist and the labels, of course, to identify when they are played, right?
Oh, 100%. Back to Lost Frequencies, from the moment it was first broadcasted to the moment it actually crossed over, it took nearly a year. So the time Armada is the label in the Netherlands, that everything was like in place, it took a long time. But indeed, yes, I think noticing...
1 year is pretty quick, actually.
Well, 1 year in electronic music is forever. I mean, in electronic music, a track would survive 2 months, 3 months maximum. But... staying on top of data and staying on top of what is happening is extremely important, because first of all, you can share it on social media, so you have content, you build fan base, because fan base is what makes you survive, or and be successful. So yeah.
So I guess in your point of view, and the analytics and the real-time aspect of identifying your airplays can actually be much more valuable than the potential revenue.
Oh, 100%. I mean, apart from the fact that we are on a fixed retainer, so it's not really, revenue is not really the important thing for us. But yes, staying on top of what is happening now, because that will help us to go back to the label and say, guys, you need to work here. Something is happening, and go to the blogs and go to the media and have ammunition, have arguments. And those radio plays will give us arguments to start working, because then we'll go to the neighbors in France and say, hey, check it out. That's what's happening in Belgium. Do something.
And I guess even for radios, if they can identify what other similar radios at their size of their genre is playing, I mean, I guess that could be super helpful, right?
We have some tools like Radio Monitor. Yeah. The name is...
I know them very well.
Yeah. So they monitor every radio, so everybody can know exactly how many plays you have, when the song was played. So it's very important for the record companies, for the artists, of course, but also for radios, because they listen, they can see exactly what kind of music the concurrent is playing, of course. So we have that kind of tools, but many other.
I think we are about to sum up, but on the end of this, do you have any recommendations to artists, upcoming artists? Anything you want to add in the end?
I think they are the decision makers. We're just hoping for them to do something. So.
An advice, maybe to
call Rachel.
Call Rachel. I don't know.
Great. Okay, I think that's about it. I don't know if we have time for a couple of questions. I don't know if there is any.